Hi there. Leanne Bridges. I am author, speaker, and human potential catalyst. And I've started this series called Now It's Possible. We've had a year of COVID and lots of new normals and changes and things going on. And it's about time that we started to think about what's possible now, maybe even that wasn't possible a year ago. And so we're bringing in people who have expertise and stories to share, to inspire, to enlighten, to help us to move forward in this new reality that we have. So I'm really excited to introduce today a friend of mine, Dan Taylor. And Dan is an economic and tourist professional, and he's really like a strategic advisor for the professionals in the industry, focusing on the rural, small, and medium-sized communities and counties, not only in North America, but globally. And he has a wealth of background that he's going to share today, and can't think of an industry that's had such a really hard time over the last year. So we really want to hear some of the success stories and what's possible over the next year or so. So welcome, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Leanne. I'm excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. So can you just tell us a little bit more? I did a brief introduction there, but maybe you can give us a little bit more detail of your background and the kind of work that you do.
Sure. So I'm gonna go way back. So when I grew up with the term creative at the dinner table. My dad had his own company called Creative Marketing, and that had, I think, quite a bit of influence on me. Fast forward, I started my career in Toronto in the marketing field, working for global ad agencies in boutique marketing shops, and also working for entrepreneurial agencies in sales promotion and marketing. And I asked the question about 15 years into that, is there more to life than putting Homer Simpson on potato chips, which was what I was doing.
Interesting.
And yeah, and meaning it was a great living, but I was looking for something maybe a little more meaningful. I'd gone through an exercise where you put your right foot in your left shoe to sort of talk about a fit. And I had two pathways. One pathway was finance, which I was interested in money and investment, and the other was wine. I'm not sure if I had too many glasses of wine at the time of my decision making, but wine won out. And I ended up buying a small parcel of land in this small community called Prince Edward County. And about a year later, discovered an article talking about economic development in that community while I was still living in Toronto. I didn't know what that was other than in context. So I called up the CAO, which is like a CEO, had a discussion, ended up having interviews, and accidentally became an economic development professional around 20 years ago or so.
Awesome. That's great. So can not everyone that may be hearing in it have really understand what an economic development professional is. So can you just give a little bit of and you know, I known you since you started, and it was new to me at the time, and I saw how you helped to transform that community significantly from more of a kind of a manufacturing based type of, if I'm saying the right words, community, to more tourism, wine, and art and creativity, as well as the manufacturing, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, economic development is that term is governmental. There are federal, provincial, and local, regional economic development agencies, for lack of a better term, departments, and really it's business development to oversimplify it. So if a community is an entity that has business potential, to me, the economic development role is to figure out what is the potential of this community, what are the resources and the assets that are there, how do they match the marketplace, and how do you connect the two together to create opportunity. So that's sort of my oversimplification. And So an economic development person's job to me is business development, sales, and marketing in a variety of ways. And it's a bit unusual to think of government that way, but that's government's job in economic development.
Very cool. And I heard you use the word assets, and I heard that also in your interview, another interview you did. And I'm not sure everyone would understand what assets are in a community. What's
Yeah,
an asset?
sure. So like strengths. So for example, the first community I worked at was Prince Edward County. And it was what I would call a primary tourism area, so not heavily added value, campgrounds, simple B&Bs, et cetera at that time. A little bit of added value agriculture like farm stands and small scale, people making jams and maple syrups, but not significant. So um, it was an agricultural community and a tourism community primarily. Um, it was a very early stage potential wine community, meaning that could have failed or it could have succeeded because of the weather. The weather affects the vines and the ability to produce enough fruit to make the crops viable. And I had run winery tours out of Toronto to Niagara, and I'm a big wine fan. And I bought into the dream there. I had bought a piece of land and was planting grapes. So I was a dreamer and a believer of the potential. So anyway, long story short, uh, 2 hours from Toronto, 3.5 from Montreal, and 2.5 from Ottawa, and in the middle of nowhere. So while it was in the middle of nowhere, it had, I don't know, 10 million people who were craving agricultural, tourism, added value experiences of many kind, including spa. There's a beach there, it's on Lake Ontario. And so I saw those aspects, including the human capital, so the people, their ideas and creativity. And my primary job was to set a direction, a vision, if you will, connect key players together, and then try things and bring things to the market. When I say things, products, like actual tangible, understandable, purchasable things, like a maple syrup festival, like a wine and culinary festival, like a taste trail, an experience trail, an arts trail. Yeah, so why don't I stop there and
That's
keep going?
awesome. And oh, wow, there's so many questions I have from that, but it's just such a cool job. I mean, it must be, such passionate about, especially when it's something you were interested in, you actually bought property and so forth. Do you know if most communities have business development professionals, or is it new thing, or was it new for you in when you were starting out to have a business development, or the kind of business development that you were doing?
Yeah, so sort of twofold. It's not new. We probably, as non-government observers, probably hear about economic development all the time, and it probably goes over our heads because we're not paying attention.
Yeah,
Every time the government does a budget, there's economic development one way or another in there.
right.
So I think economic development is kind of ubiquitous, but invisible, for lack of a better term. So many communities of almost every size. I was just on the phone today with a gentleman out of Merritt, British Columbia, which is about 3 hours north of Vancouver, population 7,000. He's an economic development officer that also does tourism promotion and their communication. So he wears 3 hats. So 7,000 is, and Toronto and Montreal have dozens and dozens and dozens of people in their departments doing global economic development, regional, interprovincial, et cetera, et cetera. When I joined the field, I, maybe because of my private sector entrepreneurial business background plus creative marketing background, to be honest with you, I was a little bit arrogant. I thought I was like the it guy because I came up with, I thought, with some great ideas and implemented them, and my peers didn't seem to have that kind of jazz and juice. That's changed. I'm glad. It's no fun kind of being sort of you know, way ahead of the pack. So long story
Mm.
short is in the last 20 years, it looks like the profession has evolved quite a bit where there's a ton of creativity and great ideas and proactiveness. And maybe there was before and I just wasn't seeing it, but if there was a gap before, I would say there's like the gap now is I got to catch up with other people that have great ideas, which is a great
Oh,
place to
that's
be.
amazing. I love that. And is it communication, tourism, and economic development often combined? Or are they sometimes like in big, I guess
Yeah,
in big centers, they're separated, but especially
yeah.
tourism and economic development.
So economic development is a broad term. I definitely see tourism often part of economic development. And then I think it just depends on the makeup of the community and the size of the community. The size usually defines the tax base and therefore the amount they can allocate to a particular department. Um, uh, so yeah, and communications, it depends. In government, in local, which is where most of my experience is, municipal government, there's two kinds of communications. There's municipal communications to get various messages out to the citizens,
Right.
and then there's the economic development promotional communications, and those are two very separate
Very
things.
different.
Yeah, and I don't know that a lot of small communities have communications, period.
Yeah.
And then interesting enough, when I was speaking with a friend the other day, um, actually, a person that I met through my network, a new contact, not a friend, but a new contact. Um, in a lot of small communities, these are jobs for local people that don't necessarily have the background or the skills because it's a small community and it's a job, possibly a job for life or a long term.
Right.
So unlike, say, a private sector market where of any substance where it's not competitive, but they're not government jobs. They're other, yeah. So it's a bit of a different dynamic. So sometimes the people don't have the skills,
Right.
including the senior management, don't know what economic development is, including council who often sets direction, who doesn't understand these issues. They often understand that it costs $100,000 to pave X meters of road, but they don't, because that's kind of tangible and somewhat black and white. But economic development is sales and marketing, and there's never any guarantee for anything, other than if you don't do anything, you probably won't get too much.
Right. Wow. That makes a lot of sense. So again, like, do you find that I don't think my community, I'm very passionate about, my small town, and I see the assets and the potential here. I would, as a citizen, have no idea if there's a business development, tourism. I know we have a recreation department and maybe that's connected. I'm not sure. And maybe I should know this
Mhm.
better, but I think and I'm an entrepreneur in this community and very involved in it. And so I imagine there's some communities that don't have that, not only have the expertise that you're bringing, but also have any kind of people in those roles. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for small communities with, minimum, so often a CAO, which is a chief administrative officer, which is the top job, or a clerk, which is an important administrative job, they often have economic development attached to their title, which basically means the municipality understands there's value in economic development, but they don't know how to resource it and they don't have the finances to resource it. And therefore, it's a reactive
Right.
role. So I'm thinking at the size of your community and your business, if you are not aware that there's economic development, which is very much, I call it economic development a contact sport. You need to be out in your community, rubbing elbows, having visibility, not on purpose to be seen, but because that's just the role is to do your market research. Who's in my community? What businesses are there? What are the assets? What are the strengths?
Yeah.
And then engage. Here's some thoughts and ideas. Would you want to participate? So I'll give you an example you can probably relate to. So having both grown up in Quebec, uh, I have a sweet tooth. I have an affinity for maple syrup and sugaring off.
Yeah.
So when I went to Prince Edward County, I noticed there was 2 or 3 little itsy bitsy, disparate, fragmented celebrations of maple syrup, but not in any kind of collaborative way.
Mhm.
So I was aware that there was a bit of a mover and a shaker in the local regional maple syrup industry, and so I approached him and said, hey, March is shoulder season, which is a soft tourism season that needs to be developed. That was clear going in. And would you be interested in maybe getting some maple syrup producers together and to talk about an idea of creating a maple syrup festival? And I explained, because this was an economic development initiative, could we somehow bring artists and musicians in, and restaurants and other experiences, so that the festival wouldn't be unidimensional, but it
Right.
would be broad and appealing, and as far as you can stretch maple syrup, so to speak. So we literally sat around the farm table and the kitchen table, and talked and engaged. And because I believe I had an entrepreneurial business background, unlike many of my counterparts who go for government funding to create events, I I think we got some government money, but I used that as one-off money,
Mhm.
and I indicated everybody had to bring some money to the table to create a self-sustaining model, which is often where government falls down. They give money for 3 years, and then the money runs out, and everybody puts their hands up, going, "Oh, now what do we do?" Well,
Mm.
I'm a business person. I'm like, how do you make this self-sustaining from the beginning, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Um, and one of my favorite expressions is all I learned, everything I learned in marketing, I learned from a truck driver and a little old lady. So the truck driver was a grader. He worked for the town, and he graded the roads. He was the maple syrup guy that I was talking about. And the little old lady, ironically, her name was Honey, not Maple. Her name was Honey King. And I hired her to be a project manager. And she had put on a huge loyalist celebration event in that area, which is all loyalists.
Mhm.
And Ron Hubbs, who's the maple syrup guy, was always on the radio and marketing and promoting. So I learned the art of local grassroots public relations and marketing from a truck driver and a little old lady. And I'm happy to say that that event survived the Economic Development Office kind of walking away. There was a tourist destination marketing organization that ran out of funds and dissolved, and the grassroots people kept it going, even with social distancing. They're doing a non-official, like it won't die, because
Mhm.
the stakeholders have skin in the game, saw value in it. And quite frankly, we went from 2,000 people in a weekend to
Wow.
15,000
That's
over a decade. Yeah.
that's
So
such a
yeah,
great story. I love it.
yeah.
That is amazing. You know, and I bet you have a million stories like this. And so let's talk about, the people that you help. I can imagine, and you kind of you did a great job painting the picture of the type of people that are in the community, some super sophisticated, educated in your line of work, other ones who are just taking this on as part of their job. They don't have. So where do you come in that to help these people, like that kind of whole
Sure.
range of people?
Sure. You mean as a job, or as a resource?
Well, in consulting and being an advisor
Sure.
in,
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
field.
Okay. So yeah, so I mean, I have 35 years under my belt now in marketing and economic development. So the skill that I bring is like knowledge and experience and like insight, right? And ability to distill things. One of the things that I talk about is, I mean, I can figure out if something's viable on the back of a paper napkin with a pencil, like to a certain degree.
Mhm.
Um, Unless it's
Because you've
something
been
like,
doing it for so long, it's
yeah,
like riding a bike, right?
yeah. So like I sit in, for example, anyway, so the role that I bring is, I bring like I'm a bit of a sage. I have wisdom and I have knowledge and experience. And what might take somebody a year might take me next to no time at all because
Yeah.
I don't have to figure it out. I've learned it and etc. So I remember once going into an apple pie factory, and this was a beautiful, I'm going to call it an $800,000 building, apple pies, in the middle of Prince Edward County, low traffic, low volume. And I remember meeting with the gentleman, and I'm like, before we even started talking, I'm going, how can this work, right? Like, it wasn't they had distribution across the country or yada yada. Anyway, unfortunately,
Right.
they went bankrupt. And so, what's obvious for some people isn't obvious for others for a variety of reasons, business background. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I basically I help elevate people and I help them do their job harder, better, faster, and minimize risk and maximize the potential for success and minimize the risk for failure.
And you've gone into communities around the world, right? You've been in Europe and doing workshops and seminars and long, courses and stuff in Africa as
Yeah,
well.
I've been really fortunate. Yeah, I've done a bit of deeper work in the Philippines, throughout the Philippines, South Africa, Ukraine. Yeah, and so it's fascinating. So developing markets.
So it definitely translates. A lot translates from one market to another based on what
Yeah,
ruralness, the small communities. Some of the things have the same.
yeah. I mean, it's like it's fundamental, right? Like fundamentals are fundamentals. So uh, all those communities have assets and strengths and potential target markets, and they all need to connect their assets and their strengths to those target markets. And the detail is different,
Right.
but the concepts and the principles they're foundational. Yeah, they're all the same.
It's fascinating. And it's fascinating to see how much has changed and how you were a pioneer and how it's all catching up and how great that is right now because like paint a little picture of what's gone on over the last year and how
Mhm.
some of this innovation is kind of and these specialists and these experts like yourself are helping to shift these
Yeah.
communities that have really struggled. I see here in Hudson, we closed down in September and it was at kind of the peak of the fall season. And it was, we've closed down on, I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday, the weekend before. I had friends from Toronto that came. They were buying up everything in the stores. And we were going from one restaurant to another. We have a music festival every summer and it was canceled. So they had this mini music festival there in September, just before we closed. The town was just finally hopping and you could just, and then the next weekend, it was a ghost town. Been closed down, and it's been 6 months now that we've been closed. All the restaurants, all the stores, except for the stores were closed for quite a long time. They're open up now, but so obviously that's happened to a lot. It's in some ways worse in Ontario and Quebec than others, but
Mhm.
it's been pretty decimated. So can you tell us a little bit what's going on and how you kind of see the future in the next 6 to say 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, so imagine being a business that has expenses and overhead and no revenue. Like, people are good for 3 months, maybe six, right? Um, so basically, I think, we're having a reset. So there's this term that is tragically beautiful, and it's called creative destruction.
Mhm.
So there's a economist from the 20s called Joseph Schumpeter, and he termed it. So the bad news is there is going to be destruction. So X% of restaurants and retail and other kind of public facing businesses, they're gonna go out of business, and unfortunately, because of the pandemic and the way it's been handled or had to be handled. That's the tragedy. Um, there's been tremendous innovation. There's been pivoting. The online marketplace, love it or not, is here to stay and it's going to grow. So people are learning new skills. They're learning how to diversify their business and their base. They're maybe reinventing their business. Do I become an experience first or second? And that's how I engage some of my customers. Do I get into the online business? How do I do that in Ontario? I think it's just Ontario, but maybe it's across Canada. There's something called Digital Main Street. So there's government money available and expertise to help people go online and get businesses. So the government, that's economic development from the federal and the provincial level. So I think what we're seeing is reinvention, reevaluation. I talk a lot to downtown business associations. They are now looking at a little bit what you described. How do I hold smaller little busker, disparate, less, more for personal distancing activities? How do we build more pickup drop-off windows that people could just walk up to? How do we bring art and culture in a way that isn't obtrusive? How do we create a music festival on the top of a parking garage where everybody could sit in their car? They come in through a gate, so they're still paying admission and they're watching a performance from their car, or movies. I think we've seen that, back to the drive-in movie days, that kind of thing. So, I mean, we're resilient as a species, maybe until global warming gets us, but we're resilient and we are creative, and we will reinvent, and we will have some destruction. And out of that destruction, some of those people will rise again and do other new different things because of the learning.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm seeing. Yeah. So it's definitely devastating for a lot of people, and I'd hate to diminish that.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you think about March, April, May 2020, and then what happened in the summer, there was a lot of, okay, what can we do, trying to figure things out, accommodating the new rules and everything, and people were pivoting, being creative and so forth. Can you compare that to now at like with your peers? And we'll talk about it a little bit in your discussions on Clubhouse and stuff, but what the energy is like now of those professionals thinking about the summer coming up and the fall, and maybe some things lightening up a little bit, maybe, or maybe not. And what's the energy like? Are they more creative? Are they the same? Are there a little bit more calmness? What's going on there?
I think I'm optimism is the word that comes to mind. So I've had quite a few conversations. So optimism. The good news is non-retail, however we want to frame that, non-frontline activity is robust. Industrial demand for land and buildings and factories, etc., believe it or not, is strong and on the rise, at least in Ontario, is what I'm seeing and hearing and experiencing in my own community. So optimism, focus on remote work now. So now people are leaving the cities and they are moving to the outer regions. And so that's talent, right? It's human capital, talent, people with ideas, creativity, resources. So, and I don't really feel that the cities are suffering, other than, let's say, those downtown core and all those shops that aren't having traffic at the moment. And so remote work strategies, people have plans in place already on how to leverage the remote work movement for their communities. And patios are going to open again. These other downtown strategies I was sharing about social distancing activity, I think we are better equipped this year than last year, because we've gone through it. It's round 2. There's other experience. The apocalypse didn't happen. Vaccines are on the horizon. The worst case scenarios never materialized.
Mhm.
There's still these problems with, lack of predictability, meaning is the government going to shut us down again? How do I run my business with staff and inventory that's perishable, etc.? But I think, I think people are feeling there is, light at the end of the tunnel. I guess we'll see what happens when there's a significant percentage of vaccination happening and how that shifts either mindsets or the numbers and
Yeah.
the health and the well-being of our communities.
And the laws too, as they might shift and open or close or whatever, depending on what happens. So tell me about, I love the idea of, kind of leveraging, like building strategies to leverage remote work. So can you give me like an example? I'm thinking, again, I come back to my community, and we're hit by that like dramatically. Our real estate in this community, which, Quebec real estate's not the same as Ontario or BC, or it's been, especially in our community, in a rural community, it's been flat, very flat for so many years. The whole time I've lived here, it's just creeped up a couple of percentages a year. And then from last summer, from the year, year over year, went up 32%, So people are like, oh, I want to move out to the country and so forth. Again, I don't know, but I don't see anything in my community trying to build strategies to leverage that great thing, except for the real estate market and those professionals. They're doing a wonderful job.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
outside of that, and there's not the inventory. So that's a big problem right now. And they're building a lot, actually, very quickly. But there's not a lot of inventory. But like, what are some of the, can you give us some examples or of what
Yeah.
some of the strategies would be?
So imagine you're a community that wants to encourage remote work. And then imagine the issues and the challenges that a remote worker might have. So mental health, right?
Mhm.
So how can a community provide, connect, create mental health resources, for example?
Mhm.
How about loneliness? So can you create social distancing co-working spaces?
Mhm.
How about childcare? Can you create places where you could co-work and there is childcare or there's childcare drop off? I mean, internet connectivity would be sort of a more obvious one. How about advocacy? What if it was great to have 60% of your remote workers stay 3 days a week in your community, buying more groceries, going to shops, et cetera, et cetera. So how can you create a case for remote work being positive for the worker and the company? So advocacy.
Mhm.
Those would be some examples of and then like sort of the co-working I'd be broader than like networks. How do you create an environment of networks so that people can connect with each other, so they don't feel so isolated and so lonely or cooped up, etc. So I think that is a role that municipalities, proactive ones, can play. I'm sure there's other resources,
Mhm.
but you don't have to blow your brains out. I think repurposing recreation facilities, right? Maybe there's buildings that are underutilized, libraries. So there's centers to connect people somehow and curate a more positive, less lonely, maybe more mentally and other supportive, services for people.
Oh, those are amazing ideas. And I come back to, I can imagine some communities saying, well, well, do we have the budget for it? Maybe there's more budget than there ever was because of COVID and support. But also, you mentioned before about how you've made some of these projects self-funding. So can you talk a little bit about that, like where the money could be coming from and something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to do this off the cuff, but you had mentioned that real estate agents are doing a good job of positioning their. So I guess my question would be, um, who are the benefactors within the community of having remote workers?
Mhm.
Can you get them around the proverbial kitchen table somewhere, picnic table outside for social distancing?
Yeah.
Can you have a conversation saying, wouldn't it be great if we made this community a better place for remote workers. It's healthier, mentally healthier, physically healthier, socially, a family, et cetera, et cetera. And then maybe they could list off the handful of agencies and partners. And then maybe the partners kick some skin in the game. Maybe agencies have capacity, maybe healthcare agencies, childcare, maybe there's capacity there. Or maybe that's where you go to the government with a pitch, right? I mean, you and I have a background where you pitch things. So what if you turn this into a concept and you had targets? One of the targets would be government funders. The other target would be financial benefactors. And the other target might be agencies with capacity.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
And I think about one of the things that I've wondered about this community for years is that there are so many alternative wellness professionals and spiritual practitioners, more than like per capita than probably anywhere else in the world, I think. I'm kidding, and I always, think about how they would be the benefactors in a lot of bringing them together and helping them to promote mind, body, and spirit health and wellness and so forth. So that would be a wonderful thing. Remember when I did the Awakening Festival many years ago, but I was really doing it on my own, and it wasn't supported. It wasn't not supported. The government said, the municipality said, we'll do what we can, but there wasn't somebody like you helping out. Would somebody like me, that's an average citizen who wants to try to create something, could I come to someone like you for help and putting this together, or would it be somebody else? Like, say that I don't have that in my own government, but I think I could find a way to get it funded or whatever. Would you be somebody that would help?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, so I think the answer is yes. My experience in economic development is your plate is usually always full, which is not a bad thing. So I had a lot of people bring ideas to me, but they wanted me to do them, and they weren't on strategy. It didn't mean they weren't good ideas. They're just, we had a capacity and whatnot. So I said, great, I will make you the president of that idea, and I will do everything I can to support you. But it's not that it's not my idea. It's not a priority.
Right.
But if it's a priority for you and you want to lead the charge, we will help you and support you. So I think you can, and you might find other economic development people that have capacity and are looking for ideas. I've just never been in that position, and we sometimes we're told that there's ideas we have to execute, and that's fine too. So that's how I operated. Unfortunately, people, my experience, I come from the idea businesses. Ideas are worth 10% and execution is 90%. So ideas aren't worth anything without the horsepower behind them. So yeah, so for sure. And the right community leaders would help support stuff like that, and or make it a priority depending on what the issues were.
Yeah. And so like a citizen could come to an advisor like you, an economic advisor, and say, hey, I've got a project. I think this could be viable, and maybe benefit to my business or my partner's business, and we could actually hire you to consult and help us.
Yeah, so yeah, as my with my private sector hat on, yeah. So what I would do is I would sit down with folks and I'd understand what their issues, their needs are, and I think, as you're probably experiencing, I'm not really taking time to pause and think for solutions as you're asking me. Then they literally are rolling off my tongue. Partly that's because I am a creative solution provider and my experience. And so I don't want to say they come naturally to me, but I've earned the skills over time to do that. So absolutely, yeah, I can help people form and shape ideas. And like I said, I can go from back of the napkin right down to, the nitty gritty in terms of helping people.
Yeah, and supporting them. Because I think about, as you know, my husband was a counselor, and I remember the artist community here. We have a really robust artist community, and they came to council at the time and asked, they wanted to do an art tour. in people's houses. And I mean, it's beautiful out here as well in the community. And the town didn't want to be part of it at all. They said, we can't support, if we support one, we have to support them all. And he was like, really trying to work with them. Anyways, they ended up doing it on their own, which was great, and they did a great job. But I always think about, and same with, when I did the Awakening Festival, I worked with, there's 50 community organizations in our small community of 5,000 people. 50 is amazing. I brought them together. I think I've got like 30 or 40 of community organizations together, art, community, everything. But I didn't have the help. And I thought, wow, in the first example, or my example, having somebody like you to help get some ideas would be so valuable. And then, because those ideas will also help us to generate sponsorship money that will make it self-funding. And whether we want to make money out of it or helps our businesses, either way, it's going to really help us in the long run, So I think that's
Yeah, well, so I think what you're getting at too is, I mean, like, I know the ropes, right? Like, I know how to do that, and quite frankly, I know how to sell it into municipalities. Not that I would be any more successful than others. It really depends on the municipality. I think it's a shame. So back to my thing, right? If people have good ideas, I think it's incumbent on the municipality to help support it. Maybe not any kind of contribution other than maybe some resources, a little bit of help. Maybe it's not money, maybe it's whatever. But yeah, I mean, why would you not want to help people do great things in your community? I don't. Yeah.
It's the time and expertise, right? If they don't have the expertise or they're stretched in other parts, that can happen as well, right? But it's great that we're seeing more and more people dedicated to that in communities. So I wanted to ask you just a little bit about can you point to any community in general, in Ontario or Quebec, or that you're saying is really kind of pioneering avant-garde? I think Prince Edward County, what they've done over the last X number of years since you were there is phenomenal. Before and after story. Is there anyone else now that you kind of say, hey, watch for them, go to their website, look at what they're doing, that it would be great to mentor after them? Or
yeah, I mean, I can't speak in too much detail, but the Charlevoix region in Quebec, they've created their own appellation system, which is, regionality of food, like is it provenance? But yeah, like, when like the food is rooted in the community and it gets branded and it's official, and you build a brand of cheese and it can only be from these farms and this kind of cow or goat, etc. So, I mean, most of the tricks of the trade I learned, I learned from Quebec, which knows how to live life, and Montreal, as you know, is one of the greatest festival cities in the world, and whatnot. So Charlevoix would be a good region. Awesome. Yeah, and then I mean, Prince Edward County, because I'm the most familiar with. And then they carried on just doing a really good job of packaging events and trails. I call it product, right? Product development. And product development and market readiness are
Can you explain what that is in your context of economic development?
Yeah. So if the big product in Prince Edward County was and this was actually an unarticulated dream I had, but the Globe and Mail in the mid 2000s called Prince Edward County the gastronomic capital of Ontario.
Wow.
So that is like the mega product, okay? And that's quite an accomplishment. And being someone that loves PR, I say this tongue in cheek, if the Globe and Mail says it's true, it must be true. So we drove a truck with that. Like, we drove a truck through the world with that and let people know that we were dubbed, because we didn't dub ourselves that.
Yeah.
They did. So in the Okanagan, I can't remember, there's a community that dubbed themselves the blah, blah, blah wine capital of Canada, but they called themselves that. There's no credibility in that. But the Globe and Mail gives you all the street cred you need. So yeah, so product development is, I mentioned a maple syrup festival. I mentioned a taste trail, an arts trail. Those are products.
Okay.
And market readiness is that you've packaged them so that they're tangible and they're purchasable. So you don't buy a maple syrup experience, but you can purchase it. You can experience the experience because it's been packaged. It tells you what days it's open, where to go, and then you can buy the products on the experience. So that would be market readiness. And then you take that and you communicate it to whoever your target audience is. A lot of our target audience was regional, but our main target audience was the media because we had no budget. So we got the media to be our advertising agency
Awesome.
by getting them to share our experiences and got it out to our target, which was the general public, like kind of, families and adults, etc.
Wow. I can, as you're talking about that and what you said previously, I can imagine working with somebody like you. You're not only going to help them have ideas to generate revenue, but also ways to cut costs and so forth, like you're just talking about with the media, using these types of techniques. So, the financial benefit would be huge, even though people might think, oh, I don't have money to do this, but well, what would you gain in revenue and what would you
Yeah.
possibly be able to save in some of your costs, right? And having somebody that
Yeah.
votes.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely perfected the art of turning nickels into dollars and stretching budgets and getting good impact. And for me, the other part of market readiness is I was never prepared to fail. So I did everything in my power to get my product developed properly, ready. And when I brought it to market, um, if it failed, there was nothing I could do about it because when I say the variety of people I worked with, we teamed up. It had a great chance of success.
Wow, that's really cool. One of the things you mentioned earlier was when you're talking about some of the changes and some of the innovation, you also talked about digital Main Street and using online. So how are some of the economic development experts or professionals in these communities using the technology in a different way to help promote business in their regions?
Yeah, so from an economic development perspective, I mean, social media has really taken off, right? So there's all the tools we know about, YouTube, Facebook, etc.
Mhm.
As you know, I've started a Clubhouse club. For those that aren't familiar, Clubhouse is an audio only platform. So it's kind of like talk radio, meaning you have a bunch of different people on, and it offers this platform to go deep and to have deep conversations with people in highly specialized areas because each room has a title and a theme. And so it's a really great way to connect that way. And then, what Digital Main Street does is it helps businesses go from being, analog to learning how, with resources available to them, to do an online shop, to market and promote, to use all those social media. I mean, the one thing that, talk about turning nickels into dollars. I have a lot of experience using social media to generate leads and sales and revenue. And sometimes it's kind of a scary mountain to climb for a lot of people because it's overwhelming. And um, in fact, as I'm building this business now, I think I shared this with you. There's all these complicated funnels and all that. I've just stripped it down to like, I think you can keep it really basic and fundamental and make it super low cost,
Mhm.
like next to no cost, uh, and to get like results with like direct measurements. So you can say, I put this effort in and I got this return back.
Mhm. I love your Clubhouse and the Clubhouse concept, and I really recommend anyone who hasn't been there. We'll have some links here to connect with your clubhouse going forward. I think you have to invite people. If you aren't on it, you might need somebody to invite you. But you usually post afterwards and on your Facebook page and maybe on LinkedIn as well.
LinkedIn, yeah.
We'll have those here as well. And it's really a unique experience because it's like podcast that's multi-way. It's not just talking to one other person. You're talking to many people in the audience, experts. And what I've seen with yours, and yours is the only one I've seen so far, it's really phenomenal. You have a whole bunch of professionals, experts from all over Canada, in particular in your area, talking about new ideas, things that they can do. And so what a great idea, what a great asset to other people around, people here in Montreal or out west or even in the United States who want to learn a little bit more what's going on. I really recommend you check that out. That's really a lot of great content. And when else would you get to be in a room with a bunch of experts? And if they could be
for free,
or it could be someone like me or someone in my community and my government, my municipal government would say, hey, I would really love to learn a little bit more what we can do and what we can bring to our community. So I think that's great. And I think also from business development for you and your colleagues, what a great, awesome opportunity too, because I mentioned to you offline there that it's part podcast, but it's also part networking because you're actually interacting with a bunch of people, and it's part mastermind because you have these really highly skilled professionals talking about things and challenging and giving ideas. So it's really brilliant. I think that's a phenomenal idea. And I want to talk just a little bit more about the digital mainstream, because I also heard on one of your on one of the clubhouse talking a little bit about that. Because you were talking in context about the artist and how in a lot of communities, artists, farmers, restaurateurs, different people, small entrepreneurs don't have necessarily all the business savvy. They love what they do, they're passionate, but they don't have all of that expertise. Is that something that's growing more and more in terms of the role of business development, if helping them be part of let's say a virtual community hub where they can come in, maybe put a website there or web page or something like that, or maybe help them develop some of their business skills? Is that something, when you're talking about leveraging some of the digital assets, is that something that you're talking about?
Yeah, for sure. So both me personally and then in economic development in the broader sense, part of our role is to help businesses overcome some of their challenges because they're focused on their business and they know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. Economic developers are in the business of understanding what resources are out in the marketplace, how those resources can help businesses, grow and succeed, etc. And so, people like me we're kind of like libraries in a way, in that we have a depth of knowledge in both helping communities grow, as well as helping, businesses grow and bringing those tools and assets and sometimes access to grant money, etc. For sure.
Awesome. So, we've talked about the need for your type of expertise and the knowledge that's being shared on a clubhouse, especially now more than ever because of what's happened over the last year. And it's not only for the people in the municipal governments who are working, it could also be the entrepreneurs, the artists, the people in the community that want their business to develop and have ideas that would help themselves and maybe their peers or something like that. Is there a particular type of person that you like to work with, or is there someone out there that you'd say, yeah, if you're thinking about this, then give me a call? I think you have a 20-minute free consultation just to kind of see a fit. Who would that be for? Sure. What kind of people would you like to attract?
I deal a lot with small businesses, so it's really entrepreneurial minded people. Mm-hmm. But people that are prepared to invest in themselves. So what I will do is I will help set them on a particular path with my depth of knowledge and expertise. There may be some components of implementation that might make sense for me to help with, but I'm not going to sort of get deep into the business, although I could point them in a direction for other resources. So I would really just say entrepreneurial minded small businesses, doesn't matter whether it's an artist or a pie shop or whatever it is, it's that they want to help themselves and they just need some help getting over a hump or getting through things, or there's things that they know really well, and there's things that that just are not in their skill set. And being in economic development and having a private sector, and I've had multiple small little businesses, so I've got a lot of entrepreneurial experiences. Where I'm both a jack of all trades, but I am a master of a few. I'm not a
I like that. And what about the economic development professionals that may be in small, medium-sized communities that are out there that could benefit from your expertise? Who would they be? What kind of things would they be looking for, do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm working with one client now who just has so economic development is very complex, can be a very complex. You've got investors, you've got council, you've got policy, you have lack of vision, you have lack of resources. Um, so it's really interesting. The call I had last week, literally, I kind of in the first 20 minutes took down 5 points, and to me created a clear vision of the issues, and we haven't sort of taken it apart yet to tackle priorities, although we've done priorities a little bit. And so, like, I can see the forest for the trees because I'm not in the forest, and I've been through the forest, and I've hit almost all the problems and difficulties and hardships. So I could just help people get clear on where they need to focus, on things they need to do, on skill sets that might be required, and resources that might be available to do that. So it's really, it's strategic. It's a hybrid of strategic advisor. I call it guidance. A bit of mentorship, coaching, that kind of thing.
That's awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to share tonight with this audience? As we covered a lot of. I want you, before you get off, just to mention what's the best way to get in touch with you. I'll definitely have your contact information on here.
Yeah.
But is there anything else you wanted to close with? Anything you didn't get a chance to share?
Well, I mean, I think the benefit of working with somebody who, forget that I have experience, I actually have a public track record of success. So my record is public, and therefore I understand how to tackle and solve problems, and I've got demonstrated successes of them working, so much so that they even work without me after the fact, meaning continuity.
It's perfect. That's what you want, right?
Well, exactly. Like the Maple Syrup Festival's in its 18th year, and I was only there for the first 8 or 9. So, and other things like that. So, yeah, I'm really good at, I think people want to have resources where I teach people how to fish, right? And then they can keep catching fish for as long as they are hungry.
That's great. And it's really needed right now. And I think if, obviously, if you're interested in connecting with Dan directly, or having the free consultation just to see if there's a fit, would be awesome. But the clubhouse would be a great way too, to get to know you, get to know what's happening. It's such a valuable resource right now. And it's once a week. I think it's on Wednesday at noon Eastern time. Is that correct?
That's right.
1 hour. So have your lunch and check in. So if you're involved in your local community, and as you mentioned, more and more people who are working from home now, you just gave like an amazing idea. There could be a whole mothers group that wants to do something around mental health. Don't even have to be an entrepreneur. People who are committed to the community and developing it economically, but developing the vitality, the wellness. These are like, there's just so many amazing ideas out there, and it's hard to just search on the internet for everything, rather than just go to a professional and to a group of professionals in this clubhouse and find out more information. So Dan, thanks so much for being part of this. You've inspired me, and hopefully other people out there in the community. This is what we need right now. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Leanne. I appreciate it. It's been a great chat.
Awesome. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.